Jane Rule was born in New Jersey in 1931 and died on Galliano in 2007. And she was an expat American author who published 12 books, including novels, short stories, and essays. And she was really an iconic figure in the lesbian community in Canada and internationally, but particularly in Canada, beginning with the publication of her book Desert of the Heart in 1964, and continuing until her death. So she was a very significant public figure. She was an advocate for writers and the arts. She was an outspoken advocate of lesbian and gay rights. She was just really quite an extraordinary, iconic figure. She moved to Vancouver in the 1950s, and her soon-to-become life partner, Helen Sonthoff, followed her shortly thereafter. And they both worked at UBC. Helen was a very well-respected literary critic, and Jane also worked at UBC, but she really wanted to be a writer, particularly after the publication of her first Desert of the Heart. And because they were so deeply involved in sort of lesbian and gay politics and the arts community in Vancouver, their life was extraordinarily busy. So they decided to get a sort of a little retreat place on Galliano. And very shortly thereafter, they just made a permanent move over to Galliano. They fell in love with the island. And as somebody who, although I came to the island in a very different way, I also now live on Galliano, and I understand why they came for a vacation and never actually left. Coming of age as a queer feminist academic, I did my undergraduate degree at the University of Victoria, and Jane was very much, at the height of her influence in the 80s. I've read all of her books. I've spent a lot of time in the archives at UBC looking at her correspondence. I've written some academic papers about particular themes that appear mostly in her novels, and I decided that I wanted to write. There's actually surprisingly little critical literature about Jane. There's one very good book called Passionate Communities that was published in the 1999, I think, by Marilyn Schuster. There are some articles, and there was a publication from a file in the archive of an autobiographical fragment called "Taking My Life," that was published by Linda Mora. But there's astoundingly little critical literature on Jane, given her really quite phenomenal importance to an entire generation, well, at least more than one generation of lesbians in particular, but also members of the writing community. And I decided that I wanted to sort of fill some of that hole by writing a book about Jane. And I figured out quite quickly that I wanted the book to probably focus on her multiple roles in public life. So she was involved in. She was a huge advocate for the arts. She was involved with the Writers' Union of Canada. She was a staunch advocate for writers' rights, and very critical of the Canadian publishing industry at the time. She was an anti-censorship activist, both through her work with the gay liberationist paper The Body Politic in Toronto during the 1970s. She was actually one of the few lesbians who wrote for The Body Politic. It was a very white male-dominated publication. But she wrote a column called "So's Your Grandmother," which was very funny and very popular. But she really articulated a strong anti-censorship argument there that was later carried out in the legal battles with the Little Sisters bookstore in Vancouver. Little Sisters, like Glad Day bookstore in Toronto, they during the up until the Supreme Court case, routinely had their shipments stopped at the border. And they were declared obscene, largely because they were going to gay bookstores, not because of anything that was actually in them. And one of the books that they made the mistake of stopping at the border was Jane's own novel, The Young in One Another's Arms, which of course, The Young in One Another's Arms is a quote from Yeats. So it's, sort of Jane didn't have a high opinion of the literary critical capacities of customs officials to judge the artistic merit of a book, and that they didn't even recognize a quote from Yeats was indicative of that. In any case, she testified at the Little Sisters trial, which provincially, and then when it went to the Supreme Court, the judges found in favor of Little Sisters, and that was sort of the end of customs' ability to stop obscene materials at the border. So she was a writing advocate, a publishing advocate, an anti-censorship activist. She through her work with the body politic, engaged with gay liberationist politics, and she was, of course, an iconic figure for lesbians in a time where, particularly in the 60s and 70s, when she first started writing, with her first book in '64, her second book in the 70s, and her nonfiction work, Lesbian Images. These were some of the very first materials that were widely available that painted lesbian relationships in a positive light. So in Desert of the Heart, the characters fall in love, and unlike a lot of literature that had preceded it, one of them doesn't die. So it's called Dead Lesbian Syndrome. So I decided that I really wanted to write a book about Jane. I decided very, very quickly that I did not have any interest in writing a biography of Jane, partly because there are two people who are slowly chipping away at doing exactly that. And power to, you go. I'm looking forward to reading those biographies when they appear. But I decided that I really wanted to talk about the way that Jane had an impact in the world, partly because she had such an impact on me when I was, doing some of the earliest women's studies courses at UVic in the 1980s. So she really inspired me to thinking in a certain kind of way. And she was just a very solid, powerful figure. And particularly once I spent time with her at very, very extensive correspondence in the UBC archives, I saw that she was actually that kind of figure for a whole lot of people in a whole lot of different contexts. Rather than write a conventional academic book about her influence, I decided that I wanted to frame my writing as more with Jane than about her. So what I'm doing is actually a creative project that is a collection of short stories called Dear Jane Rule that animate some of that correspondence. So there is, for example, a large, quite a significant collection of letters that were written by women women to Jane in the 60s and 70s, who were thanking Jane for those early lesbian-themed books as they negotiated in often very repressive climates, as they negotiated the dawning understanding that they themselves were attracted to women. So there's a large, really, they're quite powerful to read, but there's a large number of those letters. So rather than just publish the letters, what I've done is written a story that sort of channels the spirit of all of those letters into one story by one woman who writes a letter to Jane. So it includes fragments of a fictional letter alongside sort of the scenes in which we actually see the context in which she writes those letters. She really stopped writing in the 90s because she had very, very painful arthritis, and she had to choose between being intellectually sharp or taking the painkillers that she needed to make it through the day. She chose to be pain-free, but she continued to have, she wrote letters. She just didn't write books anymore. And she also didn't like traveling very much. She really stuck to Galliano. So I wanted to not just end the letters with the end of her, sort of peak public presence, or end the letters when she died, but to also consider what, drawing from her novels and essays, what might we take from some of that presence to thinking about thinking about questions that she never actually addressed, the more contemporary questions. So I have one story that's actually been published. It's in the New Quarterly. It's called Anna Knitting, and it takes two characters that were so Jane wrote a sequence of stories for popular magazines, in Red Book and Chatelaine and such. Those were her bread and butter, in fact, because Canadian publishers don't pay a living. And certainly didn't in Jane's time. But she wrote a series of quite popular stories for women's magazines that involved two characters, one of a heterosexual couple named Harry and Anna. I remember it was sort of epiphanic, one of those moments where you light on a good idea. So I decided to write a story about that was really Harry and Anna confront climate change. And it was so I felt like I sort of absorbed those characters and then shifted them to 2022, and looked at what happened to their relationship as they dealt with the atmospheric river and COVID, and that was a fun exercise. Why I think about it as writing with Jane, rather than writing about her, to look at her letters and her writing, and to bring them to light through my voice, but in a way that animates the spirit of what she brought to the world.